Hi, I'm Jack Howell. If you're taking orchestral auditions, or you think that you might, I have some thoughts for you. Every time I sit on an audition committee, and I think so far I've sat on maybe 40 committees, 50. I'm going to say 50. For every orchestral instrument except percussion, harp, and tuba, I wish that everyone taking orchestral auditions could share my experience. After every audition, I go into my Duquesne Rep class with some sort of audition-based homily, not in the spirit of lecturing down, but more in the spirit of a spy reporting back. If you were me sitting on that audition committee, this is what I think you would have learned. And this video is a longer version of one of those homilies. Of course, I may be totally wrong, but that's how it goes on the internet. Some guy says what he thinks, and you decide whether or not he has a point. At least the price is right. Earlier this week, I listened to about 50 trumpet players play the preliminary round of an audition for associate principal in the Pittsburgh Symphony. And I thought, if I made a video about what I just heard, it might help somebody. And having spent plenty of time on the other side of the screen, I understand the perception of the committee as maybe kind of an evil spirit. It's ruthless, it's impatient, waiting to pounce on the slightest mistake and crush your dreams, especially in the preliminary round. I'm not here as an audition committee apologist. Audition committees are made up of people, and a certain percentage of people are jerks. But out of my 50 committees, and that includes 15 or 20 committees at the Pittsburgh Symphony, none of the committees failed to take preliminaries seriously. When the personnel manager announces your number, we don't want you to make a mistake so we can eliminate you. We want you to be great. So, how do you pass a preliminary round? I'm going to give you some suggestions based on the most common failure modes that you would hear in the preliminary round if you were on a committee. Seriously, this is not about me and my ears and my judgment. There simply are candidates who get all of the votes, and there are candidates who get none of the votes. And if you were on the committee yourself, you would hear the difference, and that knowledge would help you become one of the candidates that gets all the votes. Auditions are a tough game, and there are a lot of things to talk about. And if there's interest, maybe I'll do more audition topic videos, but right now I'm just going with what's on my mind after this trumpet audition. What I kind of wished I could have told a number of players who sounded like they could have passed the prelim if only they had prepared or thought differently. Players who maybe had the chops to advance but committed unforced errors. First thing is most basic, painfully obvious. When you practice, avoid suboptimal repetition. There's a classic management mistake known as hoping for A while rewarding for B. And I think some of the players who committed unforced errors really could play the excerpts. They simply accepted a certain, probably small, failure rate in practice and hoped that that wouldn't happen in the audition. And as our COO says, hope is not a strategy. If an excerpt isn't great, don't play it over and over. Tear it down to the ground and start over. Every day, if that's what it takes. Playing an excerpt 10 times and nailing it 5 times simply means you've established a 50% failure rate. Even 9 times out of 10 leaves you vulnerable. To pass the preliminary round, you will probably need to play every excerpt solidly. I didn't say you have to play perfectly, although that never hurts. When the committee listens to you play, we're not just hearing your performance, we're hearing your preparation. There's a big difference between someone who prepared to play perfectly and made a mistake, and someone who prepared hoping not to make mistakes and almost succeeded. So do a quick thought experiment with me. Let's create an imaginary clone of yourself. And think of an excerpt that you find very difficult. Maybe the excerpt is in an extreme register. Perhaps it's highly chromatic or harmonically challenging. Perhaps it requires very rapid playing, or there's an exceptionally long phrase that takes you to the limit of your breath capacity. Whatever. One of the two clones practices this excerpt by playing it 50 times a day. The first 10 or 15 times are pretty rough, but it gets better, and the last 5 or 10 reps are pretty good. And maybe over the course of a month, it gets a little bit better, so that the first few are rough and then the last 10 or 20 are good. You get the idea. That's one clone. The other clone doesn't initially practice the excerpt at all. This clone practices the fundamental technique that makes the excerpt difficult. This clone practices thoroughly, intelligently, creatively, and only plays the excerpt when the difficult intervals, the high note, the multiple tonguing, have been mastered. So, which clone will audition better? The players who get all the votes play difficult music with a sense of ease and confidence that shows that the problems have been solved at a fundamental level, while players who get not enough votes tend to make it sound difficult, even if they actually play all the notes. The great jazz guitarist Joe Pass once said in a master class, "Don't play anything hard. If it's hard, don't play it." That's pretty zen, isn't it? Joe played harder stuff than anybody, and if you're unfamiliar with the name, go listen to his solo album, Virtuoso. The lesson is clear. If you can't play an excerpt perfectly, for heaven's sake, stop practicing it with warts, hoping for the warts to disappear. Practice the fundamentals, solve the problems, check the fit, repeat. My next two suggestions have to do with rhythm and pitch. The truth is that rhythm and pitch are indivisible from the fundamental and solidity and musical clarity that I just talked about. You should be practicing rhythm and pitch when you practice everything. They are integral to music, not separate qualities to be added once you have all the notes. When you tear an excerpt down, you're tearing it down for pitch and rhythm, as well as for the intervals, the articulations, the dynamics, the character, the register security, and so on and on and on and on. It's hard to pay attention to everything all the time, though. And when we spend many hours practicing alone, it's easy to become accustomed to our own pitch and rhythm tendencies and stop hearing small flaws. That's why we must establish external references and refer to them constantly. We wish to practice to train our feel, not practice by feel, because feel will lie to you all day long. So, external reference for pitch. The drone pitches on your tuner are better than nothing, but they're also weird. They aren't real musical tones with harmonics, so they don't behave like real tones. They don't generate the same heterodynes when you play out of tune with them. And the last thing you want to do is watch your tuner and think you're good if the needle stays locked at 12 o'clock. That's not how intonation works. So, here's the hack. Find the wettest acoustic you can and practice in it. When you play out of tune with yourself in a hall with significant reverb, the clash hangs in the air like a bad smell. So you want to find a way to practice for that acoustic, or an even more stringent reverberant acoustic. And you may have to be creative to find a place. I think in my college career, I got kicked out of a lot of stairwells by janitors late at night. But natural reverb is really the best thing. Electronic reverb isn't really the same. You don't hear the same with headphones and bone conduction as you do in open air. Now there are Winger modules with reverb. I've spent a few minutes in one. I didn't really dig it, but they could be better than nothing. Another possible external reference is to play along with recordings. Anything's better than nothing. You get the idea. When you practice a single line instrument alone in a dry practice room, you become accustomed to hearing yourself play slightly out of tune, and you get into a reverberant hall for your preliminary round, and it's too late. Just a thought. Now, let's also talk about rhythm. We hear that rhythm is the first cut in an audition, and it's true, but you would have to be on a committee to hear what I'm talking about. There's a thing that jazz players call the pocket. They'll say, yeah man, that was right in the pocket, or they'll say so-and-so has a great pocket. It's hard to describe, but you know it when you hear it, and it's part of what makes the greats great. George Benson, great pocket. Eddie Daniels, great pocket. This past weekend we had Hilary Hahn playing Ginastera and Sarasate. Amazing pocket. And of the 50 trumpet prelims I just heard play Petrushka, the 3 who passed played it in such a way that you could hear the snare drum in their playing. It was just so solid and in the pocket. You could just hear it. Now, I doubt that any of the candidates who played that excerpt and didn't pass thought to themselves, you know, I'm just rushing the hell out of this. But lots of the Petrushkas were rushed and they were unsteady. They probably felt just fine to the candidates. We play out of rhythm, not intentionally. We play out of rhythm because it feels right. It feels right because we practiced by feel and feel lied to us. Or we're in the habit of reacting to the beat instead of anticipating the pulse. Because legit music is all written down, it's possible to be mathematically correct by placing the next note the right distance away from the note that just happened, and like making change. And if you practice enough and you get good enough at reacting, you can go a long ways with this reactive, additive, rhythmic sense. But your playing won't draw the ear and inspire the same confidence as a player with a great pocket. And you won't be as much fun to play music with. So every day that I teach, I say, organize your rhythm according to where it goes, not according to how long you wait. If you play a dotted rhythm by adding a 16th note to 3/16, that's not the same thing as playing a 16th note pickup to the next beat. Now, how do you work on this? If I may be so bold, I made a video called The Acid Test for Rhythm. You might want to check that out. Just because you can play with a metronome doesn't mean that you will play in rhythm on your own under stress. And you may not even be playing as closely with a metronome as you think. So if you play with a metronome, try using the metronome on the half bar or on the bar, or maybe even 2 bars, so that you must anticipate the pulse, not react to it. So that acid test was my constant companion preparing for my PSO audition. Another drill was what I call a one-shot drill. It's a recording drill. And the new topic, this could just be a total new video, but we're going to stick it in here. The one-shot drill is something I started in college, and I've used it for almost every professional audition. And I think I may have talked about this in another video, but here we go. For this drill, first, get your recording gear set up, have everything ready. Now, go into your imagination. Imagine this is your audition day, and as much detail as possible. In the interview with Michelle Himbry, she said when she prepared for her audition, she looked up photos of Heinz Hall so that she knew what it looked like inside. That's very creative. So imagine that you've left your hotel, you're at the hall. Imagine that you've been taken to a warm-up room and you've got 15, 20 minutes, whatever you think you might have. Warm up just as you will on your audition day. Touch the spots, however you're going to do it. Now imagine there's a knock on the dressing room door. The personnel manager takes you to the elevator, takes you down, leads you out either onto stage or maybe to an offstage on deck room. So you play a few more notes quietly in your imagination. Now you're led on stage. There's a red carpet runner so that the committee can't hear your shoes, what kind of shoes you're wearing. And then on stage there's a stand, there's maybe a chair, there's the big black curtain, and there's a proctor sitting a few yards away so that if you have questions you can talk to the proctor so the committee doesn't hear your voice. Okay. So now you turn on your recorder and you send it. You play the list straight through, no stopping, no repeating, just as though it were the audition. Turn the recorder off and take a break. Do something else, have lunch, do some other work. Later, when enough time has passed so that you don't remember what it felt like to play, listen to the recording with the music and with a notebook and make detailed notes, good and bad. Try and listen as though you're listening to someone else. Then when you practice only the stuff that was bad. Be very careful to address problems at the fundamental level. Really think and work to figure out how to make the difficult thing secure and confident. Don't just play the hard lick over and over until you get a good one. That's the drill. You repeat. It's a high intensity exercise. So once a day is plenty, maybe even too much. Maybe you need it every 2 or 3 days. When you do this drill, you randomize the order of your excerpts. Don't always play them in the same order. You have to be prepared to bring energy from the first note and come out firing. Make a great impression no matter what the first excerpt is. And another thing, as you practice this, do this drill, and as you hone your performance, listen and pay close attention to how much time you take between excerpts. This is part of the craft. This is part of the audition too. Just as with time between movements at a concert, there's a period of time between excerpts. Some time is needed to let the mood dissipate and for you to form a clear mental image for the next excerpt. But too much time, and just like the audience, the committee gets impatient and less receptive. A few auditions ago, I watched my wristwatch and I tried to get a feel for what this perfect time is. And I decided that much past 15 seconds, and the candidate started to lose my sense of anticipation. I started to say, I wonder why they're waiting. So overall, you see what this drill is for, right? It's a cruel fact of live music that nobody cares how good the second time is. At a concert, you get one shot. In an audition, Candidates are sometimes allowed or asked to repeat an excerpt that didn't go well, but in the prelim, this is a bad thing. It's not like in a semifinal or a final round where the committee often asks a candidate to play something again differently, even if it went well. You just want to see how flexible the candidate is. In the prelim, you want to throw strikes and leave. So you train to play every excerpt as well as you possibly can the first time. This imagination thing is important also. Sports psychologists tell us that our best performance comes not when we are relaxed, not when we are overstimulated, but when we are stimulated just enough. Repeated imagining of the audition helps take the edge off the stimulation when we get to the actual event. This drill also teaches you to pick appropriate tempi. Bit of a tangent here. When I took the Motorcycle Safety Foundation course to get my motorcycle endorsement, the most important part of the test was called choosing the appropriate cornering speed. So on the parking lot where this test was, there was a path about 3 feet wide. It was in an arc that was about 30 feet across, so the path itself was maybe 50 feet long. And the arc was maybe about 60 degrees. There was a straight entry and a straight exit and lines on either end. And the rider needed to approach this path and go both directions, enter, complete the arc, and exit. The instructor stood there with a stopwatch, and there was a target time, a few seconds, like maybe 5 or 7 seconds, to complete this arc from entrance to exit. The rider gained a point for every second faster than the target time, and lost a point for every second slower than the target time. But if a tire touched a line, the rider failed the test completely. And I think you can see the logic in this test. The ability to corner faster shows desirable skill. The need to go slower could be an issue, but if you leave the road or ride into oncoming traffic, you die. And that's a little bit like choosing the appropriate tempo for your excerpt. And I can't tell you how many times in auditions I've heard candidates take tempi that they clearly couldn't handle, or set dynamics that they couldn't control. It's understandable. The story is as old as Icarus. The player feels a surge of adrenaline, goes with it, or maybe has heard another player in the warm-up area just really tearing it up, and they feel like, well, that's my only chance is to match that tempo. But that's why we train. Not only to locate and push our limitations, but to learn how to play within them and to conceal them with art. The skilled performer is able to create the impression of taking risks without actually doing so. Here's the final suggestion. Sprint to the finish. Don't assume at any point until you walk off stage that anything has been decided. However long the list, however well or badly you feel you played, when you get to the last excerpt, there may be someone who hasn't made up their mind. And that may be the vote you need. In this trumpet prelim, there were several candidates who got to Shostakovich 5, the last excerpt. And I said, not out loud of course, okay, just give me a crisp dotted rhythm and a steady tempo and I'll vote for you. Most didn't. So, okay, that's enough for now. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in music at Duquesne University or Carnegie Mellon University, you can contact me by going to duq.edu or cmu.edu and searching on my name. If you feel like subscribing, that would be cool. Go get 'em.